Right, let's move on to our next panel discussion, Inclusive Growth and the Future of Work. This panel discussion is co-organized with the Cyprus Economic Society. Please give a warm welcome to Zsolt Darvas and Duygu Güner, who will be joining us online, and Ioannis Tirkides from the Bank of Cyprus.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It's good to be here. I'm glad to be part of this event, this year's Cyprus Forum. All right, our subject is inclusive growth and the future of work. It's a very diverse subject. In some respects, also controversial. It's about technology that's always disruptive and also very helpful. We're now in the so-called fourth industrial revolution. So we are observing things like the Internet of Things, robotics, cloud technology, IoT, and AI, artificial intelligence. At the same time, though, over the past 30, 40 years, we've seen developments which are not so conducive to what one might expect, like, for instance, slowing growth of the economy, or slowing productivity growth in the economy, and skewed income distribution across labor and capital, and at the same time, increasing income inequality. So thinking about how these square together and how they're interconnected, we're going to discuss the subject of inclusive growth and the future of work with two dear colleagues and guests, Zsolt Darvas and Duygu Güner. Zsolt is a senior research fellow at Bruegel. Bruegel is a think tank in Brussels, focused on economics. He's also a senior fellow at Cornell's University in Budapest, Hungary, and he has a PhD from the same university, Cornell's, in Budapest. His interests focus on macroeconomics, central banking, and he also published recently a paper on the subject we are going to discuss, changing nature of work and inequality, with Maria Sarova. Duygu Güner, also an affiliate fellow at Bruegel. She joined Bruegel in June of this year, and she joined to work on a project on the same subject, the future of work and inclusive growth. Duygu is an applied economist with interest in labor economics, gender economics, skill shortages, and the rest. And she's now finishing a PhD in economics at KU Leuven University in Belgium. So the plan is to open the discussion with Zsolt, move on to Duygu, and then take questions from you and from people online. So with this, I will give the floor to Zsolt for his presentation. Zsolt?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ioannis, first of all, for inviting me here, and also for this kind introduction of me, and even more importantly, the introduction of the topic, which I think indeed, I mean, the future of work is indeed what will define many people's life, and the policy choices that governments decide to make these various kind of transitions that I will talk about smoother will have a large impact on the lives of many people. So what we do see is that there already has been a lot of changes to the world of work, and I will start looking a little bit backwards, what happened and why it happened, and then try to offer some thoughts on what might come in the future. But what we know that, I mean, the main drivers are, for example, globalization, technological change, demographic changes, environmental changes. All of these factors had a major impact on how we are working today. And in fact, today we are working very differently than we worked 20 years ago, not to mention how we worked, let's say, 50 years ago or 100 years ago. And the three main questions I would like to address in my short introduction are that, first of all, focusing on new technologies, what to expect from new technologies, how they will change the nature of work and income distribution. Also, how it will change the functioning of labor market, whether how many jobs will be replaced, what kind of jobs will be replaced, and in fact, what kind of new jobs will be created, equally important issue. And lastly, I will also show a couple of charts which shows that there are some differences between the United States and Europe on the one hand, but there are also quite important differences within the European Union countries. And I mean, understanding the reasons behind these differences, I think is absolutely important. Now, let me start with two sets of charts. Now, this first one shows this so-called labor share in income. So it tries to measure, what is the share of all kinds of labor consumption in GDP. Small technical details, it's measured at, factor cost, which is not the GDP at market prices. So it doesn't include taxes, for example, because it's difficult to allocate taxes. And what you can see here on the left panel, which compares the United States with the European Union or the Euro area as a whole, that there has been a long decline. I mean, this data starts from the 1960s up to around 2010s. But around 2010, something has changed, especially in Europe. I mean, the labor share went up, at least temporarily. And in the United States, around 2015, the labor share started to grow, which I think is quite a novel development and not well recognized in debates. So this is the broad trend for the US and the EU. And if you look at the EU countries, I mean, I plot here on the right panel the 4 largest countries, but Cyprus. And you see quite diverse developments. In fact, if you look at Cyprus, then you can see that the labor share in income is well below the values of the 4 largest countries. Still not the lowest. As I say in the note, it is the 8th lowest in the EU. So it's far the lowest in Ireland, when the hundreds of multinationals are there and have lots of profits. So it's a bit a kind of outlier. But also in a couple of Central European countries, it's lower. Also in Greece, it's slightly lower than here. But we can say that in Central European and Southern European countries, the labor share in income is typically smaller than in Western and Northern European countries. Now, as a flip side to that, my second introductory chart shows the developments in income inequality. Again, if you look at the United States, it stands out by having a steady growth from the early 80s up to about 2000s. After that, it remained more or less flat. Nevertheless, it's much higher than in most European Union countries. And again, we see differences in Italy and Spain. It is well above than in France and Germany. Now, Cyprus here is more closer to France and Germany than to Italy and Spain. So in this regard, Cyprus is not a southern country in terms of income inequality, which is good news. So in Cyprus, I would say a lower share of income goes to the labor, but at least that is more evenly distributed than in Italy and Spain. But again, also if you look at European countries, also in Germany it went up, and I mean, there are some diverse developments, but in many countries, income inequality went up. So I mean, it raises the questions, what role technology and automation could have played in these developments. And this is an important question, not just for the past, but also when looking forward to the future, because if we understand what were the drivers of income changes in the past, we can have a more informed view about what might happen in the future. So if we look at the literature, what kind of factors are typically thought to lie behind increasing inequalities and falling labor shares. There is a large menu. And in fact, I will argue that none of this can give a satisfactory result. And let me come to that. So I will just say that none of them can offer a satisfactory result. But let me start with technological change, which is, I mean, a very prominent possible driver of increasing capital share, declining labor share, and increasing income inequality, because it's generally so that technological change mostly favors people with higher skills, and people with higher skills typically have higher income. So better educated, higher income people typically benefit from technological development, while more kind of routine type of tasks are easily automated and can be replaced with a machine or with a computer algorithm. So technological change can be a driver. The second point, which is called the rise of superstar firms, like Google, Facebook, and we can raise many others, which firms typically work in an environment where competition is lower. Therefore, they can have a higher markup, meaning that the corporate profits are higher, so a lower share of the revenues go to workers. Now, globalization is another prominent driver. First of all, initially when China was relatively poor in terms of income, lots of labor-intensive activities were relocated to China. Again, disadvantaging, for example, factory workers in advanced countries. Certainly more recently, China upgraded a lot, and also some other emerging and developing countries upgraded themselves a lot, and now they can already offer much higher value added and sometimes already also innovative technologies. Nevertheless, in this process, it might have resulted, again, developments in advanced countries which was at the detriment of lower skilled, lower income people. And in fact, I can continue many of the other factors, but for the sake of time, because I already half of my time, but not half of my slides, let me just mention that none of the factors here can indeed offer a good explanation. For example, let me just go back to my initial slide. If you look at the United States, since about 2015, the labor share is going up. So again, after a period of almost half a century of declining labor share, it's going up. And all the factors that I listed, which could potentially explain the declining labor share, including technological innovation, might have even accelerated, for example, all kinds of digital technologies, artificial intelligence, and related things. Nevertheless, there was a change in the direction of labor share, and more recently started to grow. Now, let me focus on automation, and in fact, let me recall basically three main phases of automation. The first one was around the first industrial revolution in the 19th and 20th centuries, when many routine manual tasks were automated basically replaced by machine. Meaning that in car factories now, people not standing in the factory and doing the manual work, but simply robots doing that for a long time. And that was already at that time a very transformative change. Also in the agriculture, similarly, we have super agricultural equipment which can replace lots of human labor. So again, when those changes were made, many people were hurt, many people lost their jobs, many people suffered from income declines. Yet somehow, the economies and the labor markets could get over it, and now it's quite normal that people don't stand at the assembly line in the factories, but now machines doing that. Now, if you look at the past 40 years, it was a kind of a digital revolution, in particular information technology and artificial intelligence, which started to replace cognitive routine tasks. For example, in many lawyer offices, I don't employ as many assistants as before, because they use an algorithm, to look at similar cases for a particular investigation, and artificial intelligence solutions can offer maybe an even better answer to that than if an assistant looks back all the previous legal cases and try to find out a legal case similar to what currently at stake. So again, but still we talk about relatively routine tasks. Now the big question looking forward in the third bullet points is what will happen to non-routine tasks, both manual and cognitive. And indeed, there are many predictions that new digital technologies will be able to do that. I mean, for example, even in journalism, now there are very clever algorithms which can, write an excellent article with almost no or very limited human input. And this can be in the future. I mean, the big challenge is how fast it happens and what impact it altogether will have. But as I note in the last bullet point here, that the overall impact on the labor market is not clear-cut, because certainly many jobs will be replaced. I think that's inevitable. But also many jobs could be created, and many jobs could change. I mean, some tasks for a particular job might be automatized, but that particular person might do different things, maybe more creative things than she or he did before. So what could be the overall impact of automation? And it depends on a number of factors. Now, first of all, one of the most important issues whether capital complements labor or substitutes labor. I think that's a fundamental question. Another main issue is how it changes relative wages and of different tasks. A third is what compositional changes will it bring for employment. And last but not least, what could be impact in other sectors. Now, when looking at the literature is relatively mixed. Nevertheless, I think there are more papers concluding that the substitutions effect dominate, but there are also many papers having more nuanced views. For example, some papers find that for the low-skill jobs, substitution indeed dominates. So for low-skill jobs can be much easier automated than high-skill jobs. High-skill jobs are more complementary. So if there are more intelligent algorithms, then that can even boost the productivity of higher-skilled, better educated people. So again, the different segments of the labor market can be different. And the last point I think is also very important, which is, for example, based on a particular study for the European Union, which concluded that over the past 25 years, around 10 million jobs were lost due to automation. But the same study concludes that even more, almost 15 million jobs were created, because there are many, other channels which leads to job creation of new jobs related to the displacement of other jobs. One is that certainly more automation could lead to lower prices. Now, if there are lower prices in a region, that region becomes more competitive, which has an overall positive impact on output and employment. So basically, all other sectors can benefit. There are also higher wages has a kind of demand spillover. So if there's more productivity, there are higher incomes, and people spend on many different things. And also it can spill over to services. So even if the automation is initially made, let's say, for the manufacturing sector, it results, can have overall economic effects. Now let me skip these slides and have two final slides, and then I give the floor to Duygu. So just a quick on the pandemic. So the pandemic amplified pre-existing trends, partly because home working and teleworking became much more widespread, and it's again largely benefiting better skilled people who can actually work from home. Thereby, it can increase inequality. If you look at, for example, job developments, which on the very last slide I will show, you will see that jobs for low-skilled workers declined much more during the pandemic than high-skilled workers. Nevertheless, there's also an important but here. So there are a couple of essential services like delivery, healthcare, personal care, and so on, which simply cannot be done remotely. So there will be a very core segment of the labor market which cannot be done remotely. And then the last substantial slide looking forward, and instead of speculating myself, let me quote here two very prominent authors. One is David Autor, who argued that many middle-skilled jobs requiring certain vocational skills or numeracy or common sense will likely persist even in the coming decades. I mean, Richard Baldwin, he was very, very bold because he had two scenarios. When in one scenario he said that 10% of services jobs, which so far have been largely protected from automation, will be displaced. But in another scenario, it says that 60%, so more than half of the jobs, would be likely replaced. So he calls even the 10% big. I agree, that's already would be big, but 60% would be really enormous. And he noted that in the long run, probably everybody will benefit, but the transition can be very, very disruptive. And now this is just a slide that when I pass the floor to Duygu, let me just explain what you can see here. So you can see here the employment rate by education in the European Union on the left panel and in the United States on the right panel. So there's the advanced level of education, intermediate level of education, and basic level of education. And there are two messages I would like to tell from this chart. One is what happened during the pandemic. So you can see that people with basic level of education lost many more jobs than people with higher levels of education, message number one. And the message number two, which is also in the title of the slide, so if you look at both the US and the EU, only about half of the low-educated people work. A bit higher in the EU, now it's nearing 60%, but not much higher than 50. In the US, it just surpassed 50. So basically almost one half of the working age. Can you hear me?
Maybe not control. Any problem?
Can you hear me?
Maybe you.
Shall I try this one? Yeah. So basically one half of low-educated people is out of job. So certainly, I mean, there's a lot of floor for skilling. And now, let me pass the floor back to you.
Thank you, Zsolt. It's very interesting. We have too many things to consider. The income inequalities that have been developed, the lagging productivity growth, the changes in the income inequalities that we have seen. But let's pass on to Duygu for her presentation, and then we'll come back and discuss a few afterthoughts and questions. So Duygu, are you with us?
Hello, yes, I am here.
Hello.
Thank you for the invite, and also thank you for the nice introduction and having this space to discuss the reskilling and upskilling for the future of work.
Okay.
So I will share my slides with you. I cannot really share my slides because I'm disabled. Maybe you can help me with it.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Do you have slides?
I have slides, but I cannot really share my screen.
You must share them from your side. Okay.
Me? I don't have the rights. This is why I am disabled to share the screen. But if they can give me the host right.
Recording stopped.
No, we lost you.
Now I can. Yes. Now I think I'm back.
Bad connection. Here we are with the slides. Duygu?
Okay, so you can hear me, I hope.
Okay.
Just give me a second to. Sorry. So, I see you can also see my notes. This is not ideal, but we will see. So. I'm so sorry for this, but I will try it again.
Duygu, if it's a problem,
Super.
Now it is
okay,
good.
good, yes.
Sorry for the few minutes. I already had limited time and I lost some of them to arrange my screen, but hopefully it will work. So today I will quickly discuss what we mean by reskilling and upskilling, but also I would like to advocate the need for this effort to reskill and upskill the labor force. And I want to spend some few minutes about the Cyprus labor market in terms of the needs for reskilling and upskilling. So I'm not really very familiar with the job market in the Cyprus, but I had a quick research because I wanted to make the presentation also relevant for the audience, and hopefully I would be something new to say, or if not, maybe I will learn something new from the audience in the Q&A session. So first I would like to briefly discuss, it is mostly linked with what Zsolt was discussing actually, why we have this issue of reskilling and upskilling all of a sudden in our agenda. Partially it is because what Zsolt was discussing, it is digitalization, automation and robotization. These new emerging technologies are changing the nature of jobs, and at a rate that we cannot really forecast. So it is very quick, very unexpected ways we observe the jobs are changing. But now they are not only displacing the routine tasks, they are even changing where we are working, you know, our locations, the content of our tasks, the tools we are using, the skills we are using to perform these tasks. But there are also more structural reasons behind this need for reskilling and upskilling. So currently what we see, the education system is not really able to catch up with the needs of the labor demand. So it fails in certain areas to supply the adequate knowledge in the labor market. But also there is a mismatch between the skill set of the labor market and the skill set needed from the demand side. So these are also contributing to the size of this skills gap. But also in the future, this might even escalate further, as Zsolt was referring to Richard Baldwin. Actually, I'm a bit more on his side, I have to say, because I see with the emerging of new technologies, I think it is very likely that the service jobs that we were able to protect so far might actually really relocate to third world countries where the labor wages are lower, where there's an advantage to displace these jobs. And now the current setting of the EU labor market is predominantly service sector. And when we start losing the jobs there, then the pressure on the labor market, or the size of unemployed people would be higher, considerably higher, and then the reskilling would be a bit more urgent need for us. So here I quote a report from McKinsey Global Institute. They are forecasting that in 2030, which is like in less than 10 years now, that almost 14% of the global workforce will have to shift occupations, jobs, tasks. So it is going to be sizable very soon. So now, since we have a general understanding of reskilling and upskilling, why we need it, let's go to the definition of what we mean exactly by reskilling and upskilling. Actually, in that sense, terms are rather, these both are very similar terms, and they relate to learning new skills, but there is an important gap between the two words. Upskilling implies learning relevant new skills to complement and supplement the existing job. So it is on the current setting. But reskilling really refers to learning new skills to replace existing skill sets. It is like investing from scratch almost, and then enable people to really switch between irrelevant jobs that don't have overlapping skill sets. So reskilling implies learning new skills to replace existing skill set, but it is still cost efficient than trying to find people with the skill set in the labor market. So in that sense, these two policy tools, let's say, are very vital if we want to create resilient workforces in the future and create better functioning labor markets. So now I would like to try to quantify the need for reskilling and upskilling. Of course, these are very abstract concepts and we don't really have a real measure of it. But this survey done by Deloitte in 2021, I think it gives a really good idea of why it is good that we spend this 15 minutes to discuss reskilling and upskilling. So in this survey, they are contacting the executives of companies, and what they find is 72 of the company executives, they agree that the ability of people to adapt, reskill, and assume new roles is the top priority if they are willing to keep up with the future disruptions in the labor market. But again, the same people, only 17% of them believe that their current employees are ready to adapt and assume new roles. So basically, the need is huge. The necessity of reskilling is very important. But what these people see is that the labor force they are currently employing is not really able to catch up, reskill, and change their jobs, occupations, keep up with the changing needs in the labor market. So, and despite, on top of that, when it comes to technological development, the limit is, sky is the limit. So we don't know, we cannot really predict how technology is going to evolve in the future. We cannot really know what kind of skills we are going to need in 2030, for example. So even the relatively near future, we are a bit unable to have really good predictions about what is expecting us. Because of that, this brings more importance to creating a culture of learning and actually makes learnability the #1 skills that is needed in the labor market. So learnability is like to make sure that people are willing to learn new things, not always easy, especially for which is not always easy for low-educated people. But this is really how, if you are gonna change the labor market in an inclusive way, learnability is one of the first skills that we should find a way to make the labor force gain. So in the future, of course, we are discussing the hard skills like ICT that we know they are going to be really needed, but also the soft skills will be in higher demand than they are today. Soft skills like critical thinking, judgment, complex decision making, and creativity. Pardon. So in that sense, the European agenda is twofold. There are two aims. European policy is trying to advance the twin transition, so create a human-centered, sustainable, and more prosperous digital future, while also trying to reach the zero net emission target by 2050. But there is also the social aspect of the European policy agenda, and we are also trying to secure a just future. So European Pillar of Social Rights and European Skills Agenda, they are all trying to ensure that the future we are going to create with twin transition is a just future, is a more inclusive, less equal society. So in that sense, there are some set targets, but these are ambitious targets, especially, for example, by 2030, the target is to make 78% of employment rate and making 60% of the adult population being in training. So the training rate currently is, for those aged 25 to 64, is only at 10%. So these are really ambitious targets, but we have the tools, we have the motivation, and hopefully we also have the time to act. Here I'm just summarizing the challenges for the EU to ensure the just transition. So we know that the nature of jobs are going to change drastically in the near future, and we cannot really foresee. But what we see in the labor market currently, the current job transitions are always between occupations which have a huge overlap. So, but in the near future, we will need to make people jump this long distances, because some jobs are going to be disappear and some new jobs with completely new skill sets are going to emerge. So because of that, we should sort of break this habit of jumping in a short set of skills, but we really need to enable people to switch to new jobs with completely different skill sets. So another thing which is a big concern is that although there is actually there is even currently there is a huge training effort, but what we see is those who actually need the training are not really receiving the training. So I have in the next slide I will dwell on it a bit more, but I will just finish here by saying that also the locations of jobs are a bit challenging, because some jobs are disappearing, but new jobs are not emerging in the same geographical region. You know, it is, and these have the risk of creating even like widening the existing inequalities within EU, not only between socioeconomic groups, but also between the regions of the Union. So this slide briefly shows who gets the training, and this I wanted to share to just show you that actually those who need training are not always receiving training. So when we look at here, we see that the training rates are always higher for those who are already higher qualified or already employed, already in their prime age, so they are not really suffering from like this digital illiteracy, or those who are long-term unemployed. They are, compared to employed people, they are only receiving half of the training the employed people are receiving. And we see similar trends in wages, in gender, contract type, and also the size of the company. But overall, what this slide is telling us that we have training, but the current trainings are actually widening the socioeconomic gap instead of closing it, which we would ideally prefer. And here, a short slide about what could be the reason behind people's lack of participation in training. So of course, there are some barriers to train. It's not easy. So there are credit constraints like time and money, and many people are not able to really afford the lost income due to training. But there is also lack of awareness of training opportunities. Most of the people, like 82% of the people who participated in this survey, they didn't even know there were opportunities for them to train and increase their human capital. There is also a signaling problem. Again, another 82%, they don't even, they are uncertain whether the employer really would acknowledge this training achievement. So whether the new skill would be appreciated and they will have returns in the labor market. But I want to add something here in this graph, which is missing, which is actually the low expectations from the employee side. So because if you don't have the expectations that you can actually, by training, you can get higher paying jobs, better jobs, benefiting from this training, you wouldn't have an internal motivation to really search for trainings, invest in trainings, both time, money, and effort. So this is also something we should address if you want to close the training gap. So for that, actually, European Commission is published recent proposals on individual learning accounts and micro-credentials. They are addressing, individual learning account is mostly addressing the credit constraint, and while micro-credentials is addressing the signaling problem in the labor market. So through micro-credentials, the employees will be able to signal that they are skilled through these certificates. And individual learning accounts basically gives individuals the autonomy to choose how they are gonna, which sectors they would like to relocate, and how a certain amount of money is assigned specifically to the individual so that they can use it in trainings. So, but these are already partially applied and discussed widely in the EU. But again, although they are providing some sort of solution, there is still some pieces missing here. So I will just sum this and then finish this part of my presentation. So what is missing here is that, okay, we have the training opportunities, but we need to really find ways to identify the skill needs, because it is going to be fast, it is going to be unexpected, unpredictable. So this is why we need to build the mechanisms, identifying the skill needs constantly and feeding it into the training system. So there will be trainings available for the emerging skills constantly. So, but we also need to find ways to engage these vulnerable groups more in the training. So the current setting is not working, but we need to find creative ways to inform and intrigue them into training opportunities. So another
okay, Duygu
thing,
must wrap it up, please. It's Duygu? Yeah, please, we need to wrap it up.
Okay, so then I will wrap it up here, and I'm not going to go through Cyprus discussion. So another thing we need to do is to really increase the expectations of job mobility from the workers' side. As I said, most of the workers, especially the ones in the vulnerable groups, they are not really aware or committed to retrain because they don't see any benefit in investing more in their human capital. Most of these people are already had problems in the formal education. This is why they became vulnerable later in the labor market. And finally, from the employer organizational side, there are also things we can do. We can change our hiring practices, maybe to hire for potential instead of the degree, or invest more in reskilling and of our own workforce, and create clear career pathways within the organization. So this is, here I conclude my presentation. Thank you very much for the time.
Okay, thank you very much, Duygu, Gunnar.
Thank you.
It's been very interesting. Now, it's an obvious thing to ask here is the following: if productivity has been so slow for so many years, right, and at the same time as we are developing new technologies, if these two are connected, for instance, the income inequality we have observed over the past 40 years, the reallocation of income from labor to capital, right, these incoming technologies, and the fact that we have been having all along slower growth and slower productivity growth. What's causing this slower productivity growth in a context of new technologies that are supposed to give us a higher return, a higher productivity growth? Is there...
Yeah, indeed. Is this mic work now? Mic works now? Can you hear me? Yeah.
Is it good? Okay.
Yeah. So indeed, one of the biggest puzzle now, which is called the so-called productivity puzzle, that, we see a lot of, new digital technologies, artificial intelligence, and so on. But at the same time, if you look at published productivity numbers, even including for the United States, which is the technological leader, these are disappointing, and they are just going down and going down. And I mean, there are no good answers to this issue. Now, I saw some very good micro studies. So if you look at the company level, then at the company level, you do see a connection, I mean, increased productivity after innovation activities and adoption of new technologies. So research which focuses on individual companies, they do find that these matter, but somehow when we look at the macroeconomic aggregates of a country, these things disappear, which is a puzzle. Now, this leads to the question you asked, whether this productivity puzzle relates to indeed changes in income distribution and the lower income share. I mean, again, what micro studies show is that when the company becomes more productive, that particular company tends to provide higher wages, but at the same time also frequently conclude that the number of employees are simply going down, or there is a relative fall in employment. So I think this productivity developments can explain a lower income share, but might be less good explanation for income inequality.
All right, I think we've come to the end of our time. We discussed the issue quite broadly. It's not the end of it. It's interesting. It's going to have to be with us for quite a while. It's too many overlapping issues that come together. A changing working environment, more reskilling, more deskilling in many different ways, and upskilling in some different ways, more quick changes of jobs and employment. Jobs are always abolished and destroyed as we develop and we progress. The key is to develop new jobs and better ones, and that's where we don't see so many good results with this phase of this technology and the way it progresses. But it's still a subject in the making, and progress is coming or changing. So I want to thank my guests, Zsolt Darvas from Bruegel and Duygu also from Bruegel, for their presentations. And thank you also for attending and staying with us until the end. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.